Disneyland performers are unionizing, and the Wall Street Journal has a jaw-dropping article describing all the reasons that cast members felt they had no other choice. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is my expert on all West Coast theme parks and beyond, Mr. Vash Sky. Vash, are you ready to talk about something that's a little heavier than we wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, it's a little heavier, but I think it's an important story, and yeah, I mean, ticket prices might go up because of it.
Well, yes, there is that, of course, but I originally wasn't going to cover this unionization here because sometimes that's a big deal, sometimes it's not a big deal. But here we are. The Wall Street Journal says Disneyland performers push to unionize, protesting pay, costume injuries, and the dungeons. Performers share concerns over benefits, health, and safety as they work to form a union. This by Robbie Whalen. We're not going to read every part of this article. We're only going to read selections and also incorporate some other stuff. I highly recommend going and reading this article. Robbie Whalen does fantastic work over there at the Wall Street Journal. Mickey, Goofy, and their friends at Disneyland are planning to join a union. Hundreds of Disneyland employees who perform in parades, high-five visitors, and pose for photos while dressed as famous Disney characters, from Darth Vader to Princess Jasmine, have backed the creation of a new unit of the Actors Equity Association, a union that primarily represents theater actors and stage managers. Unionizing workers say hourly wages are too low, benefits are limited, and there are scant opportunities for advancement. Others complain of unsanitary working conditions, unchecked harassment by park guests, costume-related injuries, and a lack of scheduling flexibility. First of all, Vash, does that all sound pretty consistent with your knowledge of Disneyland and other theme parks?
Pretty consistent, yeah. I mean, the scheduling flexibility is definitely one that has been a contentious issue in recent days at Disneyland. Interestingly enough, Disney had a much more flexible system before the pandemic than post-pandemic because they were so desperate for cast members to actually be involved at Disneyland. Obviously, workplace participation was down across the board at that time, so they were very much desperate to fill those roles, and so they took back a lot of that flexibility that used to be part of the Disneyland Resort. So that is, I think, a particular issue. And also, too, costume injuries and so forth. I've heard stories over the years of, like, for example, the Buzz Lightyear costume. I think it's on its 8th or 9th iteration because the previous versions were so heavy, and that could lead to advanced injury. So, a lot of these claims here are consistent with at least what I've heard. I don't know with what amount of regularity they occur, though.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. Those are some big costumes, and I don't know what the California heat is like, but the Florida heat is intense and considerable. It's a lot more humid. But let's talk about Disneyland. But this is across the board here. Disney publishes lookbooks that dictate park performers' appearance down to the length of their facial hair and nail polish colors. Mixing the worlds of reality and fantasy is forbidden. Cast members can be fired for revealing publicly which princesses or cartoon characters they portray during work hours. Some workers, including most of those who march in parades, aren't permitted to work full-time. Disney says parade work is part-time by nature. Right here, this was fascinating to me. Courtney Griffith, 26 years old, so only 26, earns $24.15 an hour. That's pretty good for a 26-year-old to perform in parades like Magic Happens and Fantasmic, in addition to working shifts dressed as Disney characters. Griffith, who is finishing her college degree, earned about $18,000 last year and lives at home with her parents. That's a critical role for Walt Disney Parks and Resorts.
Yeah.
And only making $18,000 for delivering what is an iconic part of a Walt Disney experience. I think that she's worth more to Disney than that amount. Of course, we know that revenue figures are also pretty high for the parks right now.
Right. This is a role that's highly touted by the company. And yeah, we've seen record revenues attached to the parks division. 18,000 in California. I mean, that's rough. That is really something right there. She also talks about how her coworkers are frequently injured by ornate or heavy costumes and developed a rash after donning one particular costume, but were told to keep wearing it. She said the costume was finally shelved after a manager tried it on and developed a rash as well. So, not only are you dealing with a lack of pay, especially and in times like right now, obviously the actor strike and so forth, we've heard about a lot of strikes over the years because the economy isn't on the most solid foundation. So at this point, it's becoming a little bit too much to bear. To maybe a better phrase could be used at that point.
I think you make a fair point, and
Mm,
jumping ahead a little bit here, what a headline here! My body has had enough. Some performances raised health and safety concerns as part of the unionization push. Those who portray Disney princesses refer to a moldy basement room beneath Disneyland's castle where they take breaks between shifts as the dungeon. Disney acknowledged that cast members have given colorful names to some facilities and said the princess's basement room receives regular custodial service. That's not quite the solution I think that they're looking for here. Alexis
right.
Velasco, 24, said she was attacked by a guest in 2018 while dressed as a classic Disney character after offering the visitor a handshake and playfully pulling her hand away. The guest became upset and wrenched her head backward from behind, pulling her to the ground. Velasco said a doctor later told her she had whiplash so severe it looked like she had been in a serious car accident. That is when these people are dealing with children and people who are spending more and they're spending higher and higher amounts of money at these parks because that's unavoidable. The prices have gone up, and
Of course.
services like Genie Plus have raised the tension in the parks precipitously. In addition, you have people on their phones all day again because of Genie Plus. I don't want to overstate Genie Plus here right now. There's added tension to the parks. There's less of a focus on training at Disney right now, and people are getting angrier, and the staff is not as well equipped to deal with that anger. I think that this is something that if something is not done now, I worry about what's going to happen. There's going to be a more severe incident than one person getting whiplash. I don't want to minimize this person's injuries. I hope that they are. I hope that this is just temporary and they get fully healed up and are back to good as new as soon as possible. But Vash, obviously, you're seeing a lot more incidents of problems at the parks. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Yes, I can. I mean, I don't think you undersold it at all when it comes to the price of entry. Actually, Disney managers and so forth have noticed that back in the 70s and 80s, when those prices were a lot more reasonable and manageable, people walked at a certain pace. And then when they started to precipitously rise in the 90s and 2000s, that pace increased, just the walking speed of guests as they try to maximize their day. So there is a sense of, they have to be obviously fulfilled, but also too, you can get some entitlement right there. We've seen a lot of, obviously the proliferation of social media has also contributed to this for sure, but we've seen a lot of fights. We've seen a lot of things that we didn't necessarily see pre-pandemic that we are now seeing post-pandemic. On the issue regarding break rooms and so forth, Magic Kingdom has those utilidors, right? And those date back to the 1970s. And this was after the point where it's like, okay, now that we know a theme park operation Disneyland, let's go ahead and build that in day one. Well, a lot of those spaces at Disneyland had to be retrofitted. So when they say a moldy break room or something like that, or something that looks like a dungeon, yes, that is absolutely the case at Disneyland because, well, a lot of these spaces weren't necessarily set up in advance.
Yeah. This performer in particular here, May or Mai Vo, I think Mai would be the correct pronunciation. I don't speak Vietnamese, so forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this woman's name. Keeps a shoebox in her closet filled with drawings and letters that fans and coworkers have given her. Disney made me who I am, for better or for worse, she said. Right here, and I'm going to emphasize this. The article doesn't say which character she plays, but we do see a picture of Mulan right here, and a comb like would be in that movie. It says that she first auditioned to be what is known as a look-alike performer at Disney when she was 16. Her first job was as a performer at California Adventure, and it paid $13.50 an hour. And now at 37, she works full-time at Disneyland, making $24.75 an hour as a host, $29.50 per hour as a character. And she plans to continue working at Disneyland at least through the completion of the Union Drive, with the aim of moving out of the cramped mobile home in Placentia, California. Forgive me, I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly, which she shares with her mother and her brother. There's a lot of consistency in these people talking about living conditions that are not standard independent living conditions. People, a lot of young people who are roommates with other people, sharing expenses or living with family or things like that. And it seems like a lot of these roles are specifically going to people who don't need a lot of money in their life in order to live. I'm not saying they don't deserve more money. I'm saying they live in a fashion that is not economically fully realized.
Yes, I would say that's a pretty good distinction right there. I mean, a lot of this is supposed to be an entry level job, so there's a certain amount of what is it, demand for that kind of job, and that's where that pay rate actually goes. We talked about Disneyland Forward recently in that city council session. That was so interesting. But one of the Disney representatives said that over 50% of their cast member base is actually paid between $21 to $25 an hour. That's not getting by in the lap of luxury over there in California. I mean, those are tough conditions for sure. But it seems like Maivo had a particularly tough time. A 37-year-old performer who has worked for Disney for 2 decades. She said she wore black contact lenses as part of a costume and that they stained her eyes gray. She was also paid less for the job than someone who played a similar role but who was in a union, she said. So that's a really interesting distinction right here, as you have union employees working alongside non-union employees, and those disparities and discrepancies become even much more profound to some who are not in the club, so to speak.
This is an interesting thing for me. I don't want to get into politics or even workplace politics on this channel, but I'll say I've generally been anti-union in my business dealings. I've been part of unions in the past, and I've had so many issues that I tend to be against them in most circumstances. But looking at a situation like this, where Disney really, really, truly needs these people in these roles, and maybe hasn't treated them with the glamour that they would expect them to portray in the parks. Maybe we could talk about Disney expanding their standards for, I say expanding their standards, lowering their standards for appearance in recent years, but still dictating to a lot of those people what their appearance needs to be on some level. I think that they both widened the base of people that would be coming into the parks, but also kept expectations at a level that was maybe a little higher than those people would be used to. So higher expectations for not great wages, and also are doing something that Disney cast members are the entire experience for a lot of people who come through those gates. That is not questioned by anyone who knows these parks well. Vash, can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. These are very essential roles for the Disneyland Resort. The character greetings and so forth. I mean, it's on surveys as its own kind of attraction class next to nighttime spectaculars and attractions themselves or shows, live entertainment. I mean, it's a big deal to see these characters, especially at Disneyland Resort, where they have a little more freedom of mobility than I would say Florida characters and so forth. I think this is a big deal. I would say, look, if the unionization effort is to just have a minimum standard of pay, also for scheduling and for safety, I think they're going to have a fairly pretty decent chance of actually having a successful effort here. If in fact, though, they ask for a little bit too much pay, you might see a little bit more resistance on that end. As we know, the state of California actually passed a measure in order to make fast food workers get a minimum of, I believe, $20 an hour. That's going to affect Disney greatly, because you're going to have a lot of people saying, well, why opt for a job at Disney to be paid? I think the starting base pay right now is $19.90. Why go there when I can be paid a little bit more at a fast food joint? So it's going to affect Disney, even if it's not actually in the bylaws right there. So a lot of people are looking to get more money out of the company, so the company's operational costs will go up here. So all these things kind of work together. In fact, like puppets, for example, I know the Disneyland Resort used to have puppeteering at various places around there. They had a unionization effort asking for more in wages. They were successful in that effort, and we no longer have puppets at the resort as a result. So you have to be mindful.
That's a very good point. And also the point that character meet and greets, they sell some pretty big ticket items that are based around character meet and greets. And we know that
They do.
that there is a push within Imagineering to increase the proliferation of robots. It makes me wonder if someday we might have robot princesses wandering around the park. Now, I say that crazy right now here in 2024 to talk about that, but I can guarantee you there's someone in the parks that's thinking to themselves, well, they never have to take a break. They still would take a break, I think, for magic reasons. But I think Disney is looking at anything they can do to reduce the cost of what is something that they one of the many aspects of the park that other than trying to get a performer in that role,
Right.
you don't have to build a $1 billion expansion to have a princess performer there. You just have to pay the hourly wage of the princess performer and provide them costumes here. And it sounds like the costume budget is not what it needs to be either. I think that there is probably this is probably long overdue, and based on the comments that we're seeing from the Associated Press and from the Wall Street Journal, it seems like Disney has held on to this process without unionization for about as long as they could tenably do that. But of course, Vash, do you have anything else to say before we throw this to the commenters?
To your point there, I mean, remember, Disney is trying to sell the park in multiple ways, on multiple levels, multiple times a day. So they have like Sweethearts Night we were just discussing in a prior video, Star Wars Nights, and all those are, many of them, the biggest draw there are unique character experiences right there. We have character dining experiences and so much more that you were alluding to there, Jonas, that Disney is looking to monetize these characters in any way they possibly can. They need to lean on these people, and I think it's fair to say that at least a standard of safety needs to be applied here for sure.
Absolutely, and of course, as I hinted at before, to our comment section, I want to know what you think about this because unions are a hot issue. They affect so many workers in the United States. Do you think that this is a good move for Disney specifically? Are you against this at Disney because it is going to raise prices for the company? There's no way the company doesn't react in that way at a park where they already have pretty high prices by most metrics. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Of course, like this video if you like this video, and consider subscribing to That Park Plays for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.